Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yo paticca samuppadang passati, so dhammang passati. Yo dhammang passati, so paticca samuppadang passati. One who knows paticca samuppada knows the dhamma. One who knows dhamma knows paticca samuppada. Yeah. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity, especially to express my thanks, my gratitude, especially to the Buddhist Fellowship of Singapore for giving me an opportunity to share the Dhamma today. And it is truly my honor to be in this Dhamma sharing. And perhaps already being broadcasted in the social media, that's today what the topic that we want to discuss about is with regard to Paticcasamuppada, Dependent Co Origination. And especially now we are going to discuss about how to break the links of dependent Co Origination. And I think this topic is very important because, as we all know, that all the Buddhist tradition, all the Buddhist schools, either Theravada, Mahayana, and also Tantrayana, agree that this doctrine on Paticcasamuppada is very important and plays an important role in the Buddhist teaching. And even when we look at, like, for example, the Mahayana, one of the Buddhist school in Mahayana, that is the Sunyatawada, the school being propounded by the most venerable Nagarjuna, it says that his teaching on sunyata, on emptiness, is actually originated from this Paticcasamuppada. So according to Nagarjuna, because of the doctrine on dependent co-origination, that everything in the world exists depending on each other, so therefore he believed that there is no any what we call as swabhava, own nature, the characteristic of own nature, own of each and every phenomenon. And because of there is no swabhava, and as we know that so something my sorry, because my picture is freeze just now. So you know that's because of that there is no any swabhava in accordance to this most venerable Nagarjuna. And as we know that this swabhava is the teaching very popular in the schools like Theravada and also Sarvastivada. And because there is no any swabhava, so therefore, according to him, according to Venerable Nagarjuna, there is no any what we call as something exists. Basically, everything is actually empty. So that's why this emptiness or sunyata, the teaching propounded by this Nagarjuna, was actually originated from this Paticcasamuppada. So anyway, because this teaching is very important to all the traditions, so it is very important to us to understand. And also when we come to especially the Buddhist traditions like Theravada, as we know that in Pali canons, in Tipitaka, we can see that how the Buddha already emphasized on this teaching in many discourses. Many discourses of him have been dedicated to explain in detail, in comprehensive way about this Paticcasamuppada. And even one discourse that I just mentioned, I quoted from one certain discourse in Tipitaka, in Suttapitaka. The Buddha says that one who knows the Dharma actually knows the Paticcasamuppada. And one who knows Paticcasamuppada is actually knows the Dharma. So what we call here as Dharma is actually the phenomena. When the person really knows what is phenomena, what is the nature of the phenomena, actually he knows the Paticcasamuppada. He knows the dependent co-origination. And when the person claims that he knows Paticcasamuppada, knows the dependent co-origination, he also knows the true nature of the phenomena. Because between this true nature, the dharma of the phenomena, and also the Paticcasamuppada is actually the two not different things. And we know that as far as the Buddhist teaching is concerned, actually the Buddha's teaching is only talking about how to understand this true nature of the phenomena. Understanding this true nature of the phenomena is actually the understanding of the Paticcasamuppada, understanding of this dependent co-origination. So likewise, when the person claims to know this dependent co-origination, to know this Paticcasamuppada, he also should know what is the true nature of the phenomena. So these two things are not different things. And not only that, there is one discourse that we can find in, especially in Digha Nikaya, there is one discourse called Mahanidana Sutta. So once the most venerable Ananda, the closest disciples of Lord Buddha, says that as far as the people say about this dependent co-origination, which is accordingly hard to understand, hard to to know about this dependent co-origination, but for him, for this venerable Ananda, this Paticcasamuppada is stated to be very clear, to be very plain. And this is quite different from what the people said according to this venerable Ananda. But then the Buddha said that he said to Ananda, to venerable Ananda, not to say so. Why is that? Because this dependent co-origination is very deep, it's very profound. Not only profound in the meaning, but even in its appearance, this Paticcasamuppada appears very profound, very deep. And moreover, because of not understanding of this Paticcasamuppada, not understanding of this dependent co-origination, the creatures, the beings, wandering and traveling in the cycle of birth and death, in the cycle of samsara. That means, in accordance to what the Buddha said in this Mahanidana Sutta, in order to get released from this suffering, in order to get freedom from the samsaric journey, samsaric life, we have to understand Paticcasamuppada. We have to penetrate this Paticcasamuppada, and there is no any other way. Only by penetrating, understanding this Paticcasamuppada, we are able to get released from this suffering, from the cycles of birth and death. So this is how the Paticcasamuppada is very important, and it is also worthwhile to be discussed by us, especially for the Buddhists, with regard to our practice, the teachings of the Buddha. And now, before we come to deeper understanding about what is the Paticcasamuppada, what is the content of Paticcasamuppada, so first we have to understand the literal meaning of this term, the term Paticcasamuppada. What is the meaning of Paticcasamuppada in its literal meaning? So we know that this term Paticcasamuppada is derived from the two words. One is the paticca, and the second one is a samupada. So paticca means a kind of, depending on the grounds of something that conditioned by or the caused by. That is a paticca. Well, the samupada is derived from the prefix sam and the word uppada. Sam means arising together, while uppada is arising, something arising together, something arising in combination. So the Paticcasamuppada is the doctrine which says about how the states, how the phenomena arise due to causes and conditions. So therefore, this Paticcasamuppada is being translated in general as dependent co origination. But actually, the meaning is that something arises depending on causes and condition. That is the Paticcasamuppada. And there is one definition given by most venerable Buddha Ghosa in his work, that is Visuddhimagga, with regard to Samupada. According to him, Samupada is actually derived from the two words. One is a sama, another one is upada. Sama means right, fair, while upada is arising fairly, arising rightly. That means, with regard to this, the whole terms of Paticcasamuppada, it means that something arises fairly, rightly, in accordance to the cause and conditions. Depending on causes and conditions, the state, a certain state, the particular state arises rightly, arises fairly. And this is very important, especially with the term sama. That is very important because when we take this term, this meaning into consideration, that means that everything that already arisen and now arising, all those things arises rightly, fairly, in accordance to the causes and conditions. By understanding this, it shows that when we something in our life, sometimes we complain about in what we experience now, what we already experienced, and then we complain about. Actually, this is a waste of time. Why? Because what already arisen, that must arise in that way. What now is arising is also arising in that way. There is no any other way. And that is what actually being explained by the most venerable Buddha Ghosa in this Visuddhimagga. And this explanation is not without any reason. There is one discourse that given by the Buddha, that is, the Paccaya Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya. Even the Buddha himself has given the four characteristics of Paticcasamuppada. Why it is called as the Paticcasamuppada? Why it is called as the dependent co origination? The first, because of tathata. And the second is because of avitatata. And the third is because of ananyatata. And the fourth one is because of idappaccayata. So what is the meaning of tathata? Tathata means suchness. Tathata means reality. So the meaning of this tathata with regard to this dependent co-origination is that particular state arises because of a certain particular state, neither less or more. That means this state that arises should arise because of a certain specific state, no any other state. So this is how it is called tathata, suchness. So what now we experience, that now already we experience and now we are experiencing, all those should exist, should come to us. It is because of the cause and condition which is specific. That means it should arise in that way. It should arise in that way and nothing more, nothing less. So something specific, something fair, something right. And avitata is actually the confirmation about the tathata. That means that avitata is not unreality. So everything that now already arises, that's now arising, all those arise, all those exist in that way. There is no any other way. And that is being confirmed by the term ananyatata, not otherness, not otherwise. That means that this phenomenon or a particular state should arise in that way, not in other way. So now what we experience, all this experience should arise in this way, not other way. That means something fair, something right. So therefore, according to Lord Buddha, when the person understands this dependent co-origination, such a person will not let his mind to run about the past, to go after the future, and even to think about the present with regard to the notions of I. Something like sometimes we think about what I was in the past, how I was in the past, what I will be in the future, how I will be in the future, who am I now, how am I now. So all these things is actually the thought which is connected with the notions of I. And those people who understand this dependent co-origination as the way, in the sense that it should be in that way, as reality, as suchness, such a person will not let his mind to run after the past or to go after the future, to think about the present with regard to the notions of I. Because everything is fair, everything is right. So whatever now we experience is fairly experienced. I mean, it is right, it is fair. There is nothing more, nothing less. So there is no any complaining, there is no any liking and disliking, everything just fair. So this is how dependent co-origination actually teaches us about how to accept everything that now already exists, already arisen. Even we have to accept whatever things that now is arising, because everything is fair with regard to this dependent co-origination. So this is the first thing that we have to understand. And the second one that we need to understand with regard to this law of nature is that about the formula of dependent co-originations given by Lord Buddha in several discourses. And it says that imasming sati idang hoti, imasming asati idang na hoti. Imasa upada idang uppajati, imasa niroda idang nirujhati. So what is the meaning of this formula of this dependent co-origination? When there is this rises. When there is no this doesn't arise. With the arising of this arises. With the cessation of this ceases. Perhaps my translation is a little bit confusing, because most of the translation is not using about this and this, but this and that, right? When there is this, that arises. When there is no this, that doesn't arise. But in this translation, this and this. Why I translate this formula with the term this and this? Because actually, when we come to the grammatical use of the Pali language, actually the term in this formula, that is the imang and idang, the meaning is the same, this, not that. Imang is this, idang is also this, not that, not etang. In the Pali term, that means etang. But idang is this and this. When there is this exists. When there is no this doesn't exist. What is the meaning of this formula, especially why the Buddha uses the term imang and idang? Because actually, when we are talking about this cause and effect in relation to this Paticcasamuppada, the so-called cause and effect is not something too very far away things. The cause and effect is the two very close things. That means when there is the cause, there will be immediately there will be the effect. There will be the result. Just like, for example, when we are talking about the Four Noble Truths, there is the suffering, dukkha, and also there is the cause of suffering, the tanha, the craving. Actually, when there is a craving as the cause of the suffering, as soon as the craving rises there, immediately the suffering also rises. Not something very far away, something very close. When there is this craving, the suffering rises. Not that suffering, not far away, but this suffering rises. When there is craving, this suffering arises. That means when there is this arises, not that arises. So that's why the Buddha uses the term idang, not etang. So that's why the correct translation of this formula is not when there is this, that arises, but when there is this arises. The two different things because the cause and effect, but not far away things. So this is how we have to understand about the cause and effect with regard to this Paticcasamuppada. And when we take this formula of dependent co-origination into considerations, we understand that this formula of dependent co-origination actually can be used to explain all the things in the world, all the state in the world, not only about our life, but everything that our life, our experience, and the world, the outside us, can be explained by means of this dependent co-origination. Because everything in the world exists, arises due to causes and conditions. So everything can be explained by means of this dependent co-origination. But Lord Buddha, even though this law of nature, the dependent co-origination, can be used to explain everything, but Lord Buddha uses this dependent co-origination, exercise this dependent co-origination only to explain about how the suffering rises and how the suffering ceases. It is because the Buddha consistently teaching only about the Four Noble Truths for the whole life. For 45 years of his ministry to teach to the world, he teaches only about the Four Noble Truths. He teaches only about the suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So that's why even this dependent co-origination, this Paticcasamuppada, which actually can be used to explain everything, but Lord Buddha only uses this teaching to make people understand how the suffering arises and how the suffering ceases. So that's why then we come across the teachings of the Buddha on Dvadas Sangha Paticcasamuppada. Dvadas Sangha from the term Dvadasa Anga Paticcasamuppada. The 12 factors of dependent co-origination. That now we use the term the 12 links of dependent co-origination. The Dvadasa Anga from the term Dvadasa 12. Anga means factors, while Paticcasamuppada is dependent co-origination. The 12 factors of dependent co-origination. And these 12 factors of dependent co-origination shows us about how the suffering arises, comes into being, and how the suffering ceases, comes to end. And from this Dvadasa Anga Paticcasamuppada. So this is actually how the Buddha emphasized this doctrine, this law of nature, the Paticcasamuppada, or to explain what is important, what is significant to us. Because the whole teachings of the Buddha is about how we make the end of suffering, how in this very life we try, we attempt, we exercise ourselves to make the end of suffering. So that's why dependent co-origination is also used only to explain this suffering and how the suffering can come to the end. And now, what are the 12 links or the 12 factors of dependent co-origination? So I think all of you know about this, but some I have to, again, reminding about these 12 factors. So the Buddha said that because of avidya, there arises sanghara. Avidya pajaya sanghara. With the avidya as the condition, there arises sanghara. Sanghara pajaya vijnana. With the sankhara as the condition, there arises vijnana. Vijnana pajaya nama rupa. With the consciousness or vijnana as the condition, there arises nama rupa. You see, if we see like this, about how the avidya and sankhara, it is not something far away. When there is avidya, there will be the sankhara. Immediately, there will be the sankhara. So when there is the sankhara, immediately there will be the vijnana. So when there is this vijnana, immediately there will be nama rupa, something very close. That's why the Buddha uses imang and idang, this and this. And now, when there is nama rupa, the nama rupa pacaya, salayatana. So with nama rupa, the name and form as the conditions, there arises salayatana, the six sense organs, bases. And salayatana pacaya, phasa. So with the condition, that salayatana as the condition, there arises phasa. Phasa pacaya vedana. With the phasa, there arises vedana. Vedana pacaya tanha. With the vedana, there arises tanha. Tanha pacaya upadana. With the tanha as the condition, there arises upadana. And upadana pacaya bhava. With the upadana as the condition, there arises bhava, becoming. And bhava pacaya jati. With the bhava as the condition, there arises the jati or the birth, and with the jati as the pacaya, with the jati as the condition, there arises jara marana, soka parideva, dukkha domanasa upayasa. The old age, the death, the sorrow, lamentation, depression, and so on. Eva metasa kevalasa dukkha kandasa samudayo hoti. So this is how the mass of suffering arises due to these 12 factors. And now we have to understand little by little about how to explain about these 12 factors. The first, avijja pacaya sanghara. Due to this ignorance, avijja is ignorance as the conditions, there arises sanghara. So what is the ignorance and what is the sanghara? So the ignorance or this avijja is actually referring to the non-understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the non-understanding of the suffering, of the cause of suffering, of the cessation of suffering, and of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Because of not understanding these Four Noble Truths, there arises sanghara. What is sanghara? In many texts of the Pali text, the sanghara is sometimes referring to the actions, the action like the karma, the action. So accordingly, there are three kinds of sanghara. One is the Punya Sanghara, another one is the Apunya Sanghara, and then the last one is the Anenja Sanghara. So what is the Punya Sanghara? The Punya Sanghara is the actions, the good actions or meritorious actions, the action that leads to the good rebirth, that leads to the heavenly world or the human world, and even to the fine material world by practicing, the concentrations until attaining the jhanic concentration and then being born in the fine material world. So this is the Punya Sanghara. And Apunya Sanghara is the meritorious deeds, the bad action, unwholesome action, the action that leads the person to be born in the unhappy world, like in the hell, in the world of hungry ghosts, in the world of animal, in the world of asura. So by means of these demeritorious deeds and wholesome action, this is the Apunya Sanghara that leading to the unhappy world. And while Anenja Sanghara is something, the action which is related to the unshakable mind, Anenja, that means unshakable. So it refers to the state of minds, the persons who attain arupa jhana. So that means this Anenja Sanghara referring to this, to the people by means of that action after death can be reborn in the fine immaterial world, that is arupa jhana. And now it is very interesting because these three kinds of actions, not only are the bad action, but even the good actions, even the meritorious action, meritorious deed, even the wholesome action, that also originated from avijja, from the non-understanding of the suffering, of the cause of suffering, of the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So why even these meritorious deeds like Punya Sanghara, like Aninja Sanghara, the very, very good action, very wholesome action, but that also originated from this avijja, because all those actions still can lead people, the creatures, the being, to be always in the grip of the samsaric life, in the grip of the Mara, on the grip of this, suffering, because of this, action, even though that action is likely the very good action, but as long as that is originated from the avijja, originated from this non-understanding of the Four Noble Truths, on those actions can lead the persons to be reborn again and again in this very samsaric life. So that's why avijja pacaya sankhara. And then sankhara pacaya vijnana. So when there is these actions, the actions which is, just now being related to the three kinds of actions. So when there is this action, when there is this sankhara, there arises vijnana. So as soon as there is the actions, of course, there will be the vijnana. Vijnana means consciousness. There are 6 kinds of consciousness. So according to many discourses about this vijnana in this regard, normally the Buddha defined this vijnana as 6 consciousness: the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose, the tongue, this body, and the mind consciousness. Because of this action, there will be the consciousness. And in certain discourse, this consciousness is also, vijnana is also referring to gandhava. Gandhava means kind of the padisani vijnana, the linking rebirth, kind of the consciousness which is linking from this world to another world in the times of death. So this is the Gandhava. But somehow this Gandhava and this Vijnana and this Paticcasamuppada Vijnana is also a part of this, the whole Vijnana. So there is no something different. Only that rises in the times of death, in the times of being reborn. So that is called as the Paticcasamuppada Vijnana. But somehow that is also Vijnana as a part of the 6 kinds of Vijnana. So that's why there's vijnana, the consciousness, in many discourses referring to the 6 kinds of consciousness. And now when there is this consciousness as the conditions, there will be nama rupa, the name and form. So what is the name and form here? The nama is the name. That name is actually referring to especially to the 3 khandha, 3 aggregates: the feeling, the perception, and the sankhara khandha, the mental formations. But in some discourses, this nama, this name, refers to the 5 things, the 5 mental things. The first is the Vedana, the Vedana, that the feeling. The second is the Sanya, the perception. The third is the Phasa, the contact. The fourth one is the Cetana, like the motive of our mind. And the fourth one is the Manasikara, attention. So actually, the first and the second is referring to the Vedana Khandha and Sanya Khandha, while the 3 others, the remaining 3, referring to the Sankhara Khandha. So therefore, this nama, which is mentioned in this regard, in this Paticcasamuppada, refers to the 3 aggregates: Vedana, Sanya, and Sankhara, while Rupa is the Rupa Khandha. So this Vijnana, because of consciousness, there arises the 4 aggregates. There arises a Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, and Sankhara. And in other words, there arises name and form, Nama and Rupa. And because of Nama and Rupa, because of this name and form, as the condition, there arises Salayatana, the 6 sense bases: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. And because of the 6 sense bases, Salayatana, of course, there arises the contact, the phasa. And many discourses, like for example, in Paticcasamuppada Sutta, when we are talking about how the six bases, the six sense bases give rise to this phasa, the contact, it says like this: Cakunca paticca rupe upajati caku vinyanang tinang sanghati paso. So when there is this I and the object, the form, there arises the I consciousness. So when there is this I and the object, the form, there arises the I consciousness. So when these three get together, the I, the form, and the I consciousness get together, there arises phasa, there arises contact. So it means that when there is this salayatana, these six sense bases, there arises the phasa, there arises the contact. So with the contact as the conditions, there arises vedana, the feeling. So that's why in Madhupindika Sutta, it also continues to say that the phasa pacaya vedana. So paticca cakunca paticca rupe upajati caku vinyanang tinang sangati paso phasa pacaya vedana. So with the phasa, with the contact as the condition, there arises the vedana, the feeling. So the feeling is depending on what the experience that the six sense organs at the time experience the object. If the experience something that good, and then there arises the pleasant feeling. But when the object is something unpleasant, something bad, something actually not agreeable to the mind, there arises the unpleasant feeling. But if something or the object, the external object, responded by these six sense organs, something which is neutral, not bad, not also good, so there arises kind of the neutral feeling. So this feeling arises due to the contact between the sense organs and the object, the external object. When they get together, there arises this feeling. It can be the pleasant feeling, it can be the unpleasant feeling, it can be neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, then neutral feeling. And with the feeling as the conditions, there arises the tanha, the craving. So that craving, the arisings of craving also depends on what feeling at that time arises. So when the feeling is really unpleasant feeling, so therefore the tanha, the craving, can be a kind of the vibhava tanha, the craving of avoiding, the craving of not becoming, the craving of hating, the craving of run away from that experience. But if the feeling is a pleasant feeling, so the craving, the tanha which arises, can be the tanha, can be the tanha, kind of the kama tanha, and sometimes bhava tanha, the craving for sensual pleasures, or the craving to become, the craving to attach, the craving to get, kind of the becoming, the bhava. And of course, this craving is also connected with the six sense organs. So the craving with regard to the eyes, with regard to the ears, with regard to this nose, to the tongue, to the body, and the craving with regard to the mental, to the mind. And with the craving as the conditions, there arises the upadana, attachment, the clinging. So there are four kinds of attachment. It can be the attachment to the view, that the view that we have, including the view about the teachings of the Buddha. It can become the attachment, it can become the clinging, and it can be the attachment to the silabhata, the attachment to the rite and ritual. And it can be the attachment with regard to the sensual pleasures, kamupadana. And it can be the attachments with regard to the notions of I. So we attach to the notions of I. And I think almost all the people have this kind of attachment. the attachment, the clinging with regard to the notions of I, because it is a very difficult to, to get away from these notions of I. And this attachment arises due to the craving. So whatever the craving that we have, it can create, it can produce that attachment. And it can be one of these four attachments. It can be the attachment to the sensual pleasures, to the rite and ritual, attachment to the view, to the idea, to the way of thinking, and it can be the attachment to the notions of I, that we believe that there is this I. We believe that there is the, the like self within ourselves. So this is also kinds of attachment. And because of this attachment, because of this upadana, because of this clinging, there arises the becoming, there arises the bhava. That means when we attach something, when we cling something, so that will make the continuation, that will make the bhava, the becoming, to become this and that, to become the creature, to become the being, to be born either in the, like the kama loka or kama bhava, to become the beings in this, the sensual realm. It can be the becoming to be born in this rupa bhava, the fine material realm, or it can be the becoming to the arupa bhava, the fine immaterial realm. So this can happen. So this birth, this becoming, either kama bhava, rupa bhava, or arupa bhava, happens because of this attachment, because of the clinging. So as long as we have the attachment to anything, either to sensual pleasures, to the notions of I, to the view, to this, ritual, rite and ritual, as long as there is these kinds of attachment, these kinds of clinging, there will be the becoming, either to the kama bhava, rupa bhava, or arupa bhava. And because of this becoming, this bhava pachaya jati, because of this becoming, so inevitable there arises, that is the birth in any kinds of being, in any kinds of creature. And of course, because of the birth, to be human beings, to be heavenly beings, to be, Brahma beings, or to the hell being, and so on. Because of the birth, there arises the old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, depression, and so on. All kinds of suffering happens. All kinds of suffering arises due to this birth. And this is how the Buddha says, the whole mass of suffering arises due to these 12 links, these 12 factors linking together, produces various kinds of suffering, produces the birth, and again produces many kinds of suffering. So as long as we are still in the grip of these 12 links, in these 12 factors, so we will not be able to get released from this suffering, from this samsaric journey. So that's why the main point here is that how to break the chains, the links of these dependent co-originations. How to cut off this dependent co-origination in order to get release, in order to get freedom from this samsaric life, from this suffering in the cycles of birth and death. So when we are talking about how to break, how to cut off these dependent co-originations, actually we can cut this dependent co-origination in any factor that we actually penetrate, we actually understand fully, in any factor, not only in the first factor like avijja, but even in any factor that we really fully understand, we really fully penetrate in that point, in that factor. Such a person, we can break, we can cut that links, that chain. And by cutting that chain, the whole change will disappear, will be eliminated. So in Visuddhimagga, there is one simile that's given by the most venerable Buddhaghosa, saying that to understand this Paticcasamuppada, it is just like the person that's going to the forest, and then he saw a certain creeper plant in that forest. In order to see the whole plants of that creeper, sometimes such a person seeing that creeper from the base, from the bottom of that plant, and then being dragged, and then just trace on that trunk, following the trunk of that plant, and ultimately comes to the end, find out the tips, the top of that creeper plant. But sometimes the person can understand the whole creeper by first understanding the top of that plant, finding the top of that plant, and then just being dragged from the top, and then just following on the trunk, and ultimately also comes to know the base of that creeper. And sometimes such a person understands the whole creeper from the middle of that creeper. So by taking the middle and then just drag that the creeper, and then ultimately the top and the base of the tree also can be understood, can be known. So that's why this most venerable Buddhaghosa says that in order to understand and in order to penetrate and to cut this dependent co-origination, the 12 factors of dependent co-origination can be from anywhere, can be from any factor, can be from the base, from the middle, even can be from the top. Of course, in many discourses, the Buddha uses from the base. He says that avijayat-veva asesa viraga nirodho sankara nirujati. With the fully cessation of that avijja, of that ignorance, there is the cessation of Sankara. And with the Sankara, with the cessation of Sankara, there is the cessation of Vijnana. So with the cessation of Vijnana, there is also the cessation of Namarupa. So that means when the person can cut right away from that avijja, from that ignorance, understanding the Four Noble Truth, that the Four Noble Truth that before not being understood and then now being understood, the Four Noble Truth is being understood, so that means the whole chains also will be cut off. When the person understands the Four Noble Truths, that means the vijja arises instead of avijja, but vijja arises. So all the other factors also being cut. The Sankhara is being cut, the Vijnana is being cut, Namarupa is being cut, Salayatana, Pas, and so on is being cut because of this understanding of the Four Noble Truths, destroying, eliminating the avijja and make it vijja arises. The understanding arises. The understanding of the Four Noble Truth arises. And that can be the media, can be the instrument how to cut the whole dependent co-origination. And if we see that's in one discourse that's given by the most venerable Sariputta, that is in the Sammaditthi Sutta, there is one interesting explanation there when most venerable Sariputta, as the best disciples of the Buddha, best in wisdom, being asked by his fellow monks about what is the Sammaditthi, what is the right view, and how the person who has the right view can be considered as the one who already attained the goal of the holy life, that means a nibbana, that can be understood. And that the most venerable Sariputta said about various kinds of the Sammaditthi. And it is being started with, when the person understands what is kusala, what is akusala, what is the root of kusala, what is the root akusala, the lobha, dosa, and moha as the root of kusala, alobha, dosa, and moha as the root of akusala, as the root of unwholesome states. And when the person understands this, truly understand this kusala and akusala, according to the most venerable Sariputta, that persons can eliminate all the latent tendency to the desire, the latent tendency to the aversions, the latent tendency to the avidya, the ignorance, and such persons will make the end of suffering. So by means of understanding kusala and akusala, such person can make the end of suffering. And the interesting thing in this discourse is that the most venerable Sariputta also talking about the understanding of each and every factor in this Paticcasamuppada. Being asked by his fellow monks, he said that when the person, for example, understand what is the bhava, what is the cause of bhava, what is the cessations of bhava, and what is the way leading to the cessations of bhava, such a person also will make the end of suffering. What is the bhava? As I mentioned, there are three kinds of bhava. The kama bhava, rupa bhava, and arupa bhava. That is the bhava. So what is the cause of bhava? This attachment, the clinging. That is the cause of the bhava. And what is the cessations of bhava? When this clinging ceases, bhava, the becoming, also ceases. And what is the way leading to the cessations of bhava? That is the noble eightfold path. The right view, the right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So by means of this, the noble eightfold path, that is the way to leading to the cessations of bhava. So by understanding these four things, starting from bhava, the cause of bhava, the cessations of bhava, and the way leading to the cessations of bhava, that's also enough to make such a person making the end of suffering, to make such a person get released from the suffering. Because understanding that, of course, such a person will make an effort how, because he understands the bhava is suffering, the becoming is suffering, and he understands that because of this attachment, he just always, get reborn in these three kinds of becoming, and then he makes an effort how to get release, how to get rid of this attachment. By making effort to get a release, to eliminate this attachment, this clinging, that's enough for such persons to cut off this dependent co origination, to make the end of suffering. So likewise, in that discourse, Sammaditthi Sutta, the most venerable Sariputta also say that when the person understands the clinging, the cause of clinging, the cessations of clinging, and the way leading to the cessations of clinging, such a person also is able to make the end of suffering. Such a person is also able to get released from the suffering, to get freed from the suffering. So what is the clinging? That is the four kinds of clinging that I just mentioned. The attachment to the sensual places, attachment to the notions of I, attachment to the rite and ritual, attachment to the view, everything, our idea, and so on, the four kinds of attachment. And what is the cause of attachment? The craving. And what is the cessations of craving? That is the cessations of, the cessation of clinging, that is the cessations of craving. And the way leading to the cessations of craving is none other than this noble eightfold path. And understanding this itself, just by understanding this fully penetrating, that's also enough for such a person to cut off the whole links of this Paticcasamuppada. Because when the person understands the clinging as the suffering, and the cause of the clinging is the tanha, the craving, so that means such a person will make an effort, his best effort, how to get rid of this craving, how to eliminate this craving. By means of what? The Noble Eightfold Path. By practicing the Noble Eightfold Path to make the end of this craving and to make the end of the whole mass of suffering. So that's also enough. So likewise, again, then Rebbe Sariputta said about, about this. What is the craving? What is the cause of the craving? What is the cessations of craving? What is the way leading to the cessations of craving? So the craving is the six kinds of craving. The craving for the eyes, the ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. Various kinds of craving. And this craving as the suffering is caused, conditioned by the Vedana, by the feeling. And with the cessations of feeling, there is the cessations of craving. And how to make the end, how to eliminate this craving? By means of practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. The same thing, Atangika Arya Magga. That's also enough for such a person to make the end of suffering, enough for such a person to cut off this dependent Co Origination. Understanding that craving is the suffering, and understand that Vedana, this feeling as the cause, such a person will be, make effort how to really understand what is the feeling, how really to understand, how really to have the mindfulness to that feeling. As you know, in one discourse of Majjhima Nikaya, Chula Vedala Sutta, for example, it says that when the person doesn't have any kind of mindfulness, so these three kinds of feeling, the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feeling, can make rise of a kinds of, the latent tendency of defilements of mind. So when there is the pleasant feeling, and we don't have any mindfulness at all to see, to detect this unpleasant feeling, there arises the latent tendency on the aversions. There is the aversion within our minds. There is the defilements of mind, the aversion, the disliking. And when there is the pleasant feeling and we don't detect with our mindfulness, there arises, the raga nusaya, the underlying tendency, the latent tendency connected with raga, desire. That is a kind of the lobha. It is a kind of the greed, kind of wishing to get. So this is also defilements of mind. And that arises due to the feeling. And when there is a neutral feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling arises, and we don't have any mindful, we are not mindfully attending that feeling, that also will give rise to the avijjanusaya, to the latent tendency, underlying tendency on ignorance, because at that moment there's no any understanding as to how this feeling also actually just impermanence, just subject to change. And because of there's no any understanding, there arises the attachment to that feeling, even that is a neutral feeling. So when there is no any mindful mind, there is no any mindfulness, not attending any kinds of feeling, there arises various kinds of defilements of mind. So there arises the suffering. So that's why understanding that this feeling is the cause of craving, such a person who understands of that importance will just attend the feeling with mindfulness. That's why in the four foundations of mindfulness, the practice on meditation, the practice on mindfulness, as being identical with vipassana bhavana, the insight meditations, one of the foundations of mindfulness is the feeling. By detecting, by understanding the feeling, by concentrating on the feeling, by being mindful on the feeling. Why? Because when we mindful on the feeling, So the defilements of mind that should arise will not arise. So this is how the importance of this. And by means of this, by practicing this, that also enough to cut off these links or factors or chains of dependent co-originations. So there are many ways how to break this dependent co-origination. And in each and every factor that we really fully understand, fully penetrate, that factor itself can be the media, can be the instrument to break, to cut this dependent co-origination, to make the end of suffering. So that's why here that I want to emphasize the questions with regard to how to break this dependent co-origination. We can break from any factor in each and every factor of this dependent co-origination. And how to break? Of course, we have to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. We have to, develop this Sammaditthi in the right view, the right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So by means of this Noble Eightfold Path, we understand each and every phenomenon in these factors, in these links of dependent co-origination, and we make, fully understanding about that by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. That is the way how to break, how to cut this dependent co-origination, and that is the way how to get released from the suffering, from the cycles of birth and death. So this is the importance of this dependent co-origination. And by, fully understanding even one factor of these factors of dependent co-origination, all those other factors also being cut, eliminated. So now we can just, try to fully understand one of these. For example, from avijja, that's okay, or from sankhara. For example, we understand, the sankhara is the action. As long as we have the actions, there will be the suffering, there will be the rebirth, there will be the consciousness, and there's so on going to the rebirth. So that's why in meditation, like insight meditation, we are being encouraged by Lord Buddha to see whatever experience as mere experience. Why? Because when we just, practicing our mind to see or to practice within our mind in whatever experience, just mere experience, there will be no actions. There will be no sankhara. And that is also the practice. The practice how to get rid of sankhara, how to get rid of this action by merely seeing whatever existing as mere existence. So just like the Buddha giving advice to one wanderer, the name is Bahaya, he said, Tite tidak matang babisati. In the sin, practice, train yourself that is only mere seeing. Sute sutta matang babisati. In the heart, you have to train yourself that is just mere heard, mere hearing. There is no anything what we call as the I. There is no anything what we call as the self. That is only just phenomenon. And by practicing that, actually, and that moment, there is no any action. There is no any sankhara. Practicing the meditations within that, there is no any sankhara. There is no any, the kind of reaction. So this is how we can break. Yeah, we practice ourselves. We train ourselves how to break this dependent co-origination by understanding that the sankhara is the cause of suffering. So therefore, in the meditation, we try our best not to make a new sankhara, not to make a new actions. That is also the way. And also when we are talking about the vijnana and namarupa, also the same. As we know that, the Buddha said, as long as the life is, actually, it is just, the kind of the drama of this vijnana and namarupa. That means the whole times in the cycles of birth and death, we actually just have this vijnana and namarupa. Because vijnana always getting the foothold in that namarupa, And that Namarupa is being grasped, being gripped by this vijnana the whole times we don't get released from this samsaric life, from these cycles of birth and death, because vijnana and namarupa just getting together all the time. So that's why in the meditations, what we train ourselves is that how to make vijnana not to get foothold in this nama and rupa. Vijnana is kind of the subject, well, namarupa is kind of the object. How the subject not to get hold in this object, and how the object not to get grasped, not to get caught by this vijnana. That this is the training in the meditations. So that's why while seeing, it is just only seeing. While hearing, this is only hearing. All the things that we experience, this is only the mere experience. In order to train our vijnana, our consciousness not to attach to the object, not to attach to this name and form, to this vedana, sanya, and sankara, as well as to the rupa. And this is how also the way how to cut this dependent co-origination. By cutting this, of course, all the other factors also being cut, being eliminated. So this is how this the questions about how to break this dependent co-origination. Of course, we can break it by means of understanding fully, penetrating fully in each and every, this can be in one of these factors of dependent co-origination, and of course by means of practicing, developing the Noble Eightfold Path. When we are talking even the Vipassana, insight meditation is also a part of this, the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is how we have to understand and how we have to practice in our daily life. So I think that's what I want to say for today. So I hope you can understand what I'm saying, what I'm explaining, and I hope we can develop our minds. And I hope this what I share about this Paticcasamuppada can give new understanding to all of you, and may all beings be happy. Thank you very much.
Sadhu, 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 Bhante. Maybe now, brothers and sisters, would like to ask any questions?
Bhante, I have a question. Can I ask, how can we not let strong feelings to generate desire and craving if our emotions are very strong and maybe our mindfulness is not strong enough? So how do we actually let it not get in the way of our practice?
Yeah. We have to understand that the so-called mindfulness should be followed with the wisdom. Not only just mindfulness, not only just sati, but also there should be the wisdom, the panya, the understanding. So that means that when, for example, there is a strong feeling, the desire very strong, and then by means of it just looking at, by detecting, by means of mindfulness, that strong feeling, the desire do not, comes to end. So we have to make the kind of the wisdom. We have to give rise to wisdom. We have to make a kind of the contemplations. For example, we contemplate about the anicca. We contemplate about that this also will pass. This also subject to change. Or sometimes we have to contemplate about the danger of that strong feeling, the danger of that desire. So as long as that our mind is being, caught by this desire, very strong desire, that will create the suffering in the future, the unhappy world after death. So by means of these contemplations about the danger of that strong desire, and that is actually the wisdom, that is actually the panya, that actually coming, following this sati, this mindfulness, that also can make that, that strong desire can disappear. And not only just, contemplating that the danger of that strong desire, but also we have to contemplate about the advantage of having mindfulness, about the advantage of destroying this strong desire. What is the advantage? The advantage is that by destroying, by eliminating this strong desire, actually we can have the happiness, not only just the worldly happiness, but spiritual happiness. And that is also the way how to lead ourselves to get freedom from the suffering. So the two things, contemplating about the danger of that strong desire and contemplating about the advantage of eliminating that desire by means of these contemplations, and that is the wisdom, and that is actually a part of the mindfulness and the wisdom. So this little by little, that strong desire or defilements of mind can be eliminated. So I think that is that we can do with regard to this strong desire or defilements of mind, the strong defilements of mind. I think so. That is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer. Thank you very much. It's very wise.
Yes.
How about any brothers would like to ask any questions?
Bhante, just now Bhante explained about, give some example about how to do good deeds. I mean, how to break the Sankara. Does it mean that when we are doing some good deeds, let's say giving dana, does it mean that we shouldn't have any thoughts of, any wish during our action? Thank you.
Actually, the most important is that we have to understand the Four Noble Truths. Of course, when we are doing something, it is not wrong to have the wish. It is not wrong to have a kind of the, wants in that, doing something. It's okay. But in the meantime, we also have to understand about the Four Noble Truths. We have to understand about this is a suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. At least we understand about the way leading to the cessation of suffering. For example, we are doing the good things like giving dana to the monks, to the temple, for example. And then we understand and we wish that by means of this dana, by means of this giving, that will give, support to eliminate the defilements of minds, like the stinginess, like the greed. Perhaps like when we are doing dana, giving with the compassion, with the loving kindness, that means that also as the support how to eliminate the hatred. And because we give something with understanding, it is also the development of the wisdom, the panya, that is the elimination of the, especially the moha, the delusion. So understanding that, having that kind of a wish, that is okay, because that is still in connected with the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's why there is one, discourse given Lord Buddha about the motive of the giving. There are various kinds of motive of the givings. And one of the motives is a very being praised by Lord Buddha, that is that the person gives something or some doing giving with the motive to get freed from these defilements of mind, to beautify this mental, this mind, to adorn this mind, citta langkara, citta parikara, to adorn, to beautify this mind. That means giving something in order to get release the defilement of mind. And that is the wish. The wish how to get release from the defilements of mind by means of giving. And that's okay, because that is actually still connected with the Noble Eightfold Path. So the most important is that we understand what we are doing, and that is still within this Noble Eightfold Path. That is still the way how to get rid of these defilements of mind. What actually the meaning of that when doing something good, but without understanding of the Noble Eightfold Path, without understanding of the that's Noble Eightfold Path, is actually really the person is ignorance. Really such a person do not understand about the Noble Eightfold Path, about the Four Noble Path, the Four Noble Truth, I mean. Really have the ignorance, really do not know there is this, the Four Noble Truth. I would like to say that mostly people do not know about the Four Noble Truths. I think only the Buddhist people, even not all the Buddhist people understand the Four Noble Truth. And because not understanding that there is the way how to get rid of this suffering, of this samsaric life. So people doing this and that, including doing the good things, just in order to get, to get rebirth, to get reborn in other realm, other world. But for the Buddhist people who understand the Four Noble Truth, doing something good, doing meritorious actions, not with the wish of getting rebirth, getting reborn in other world, but with the wish of getting rid of these defilements of mind, doing the good things, doing the kusala dhamma, in order to get rid of the defilements of mind. So that is a different things. So the wish is okay, but of course, it is still in connections with the Noble Eightfold Path, and as a whole, it is in connection with the Four Noble Truths. So I think so. I hope you can understand what I'm explaining. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. There's one question here. From Bhante's point of view, all the 12 links that Bhante has explained, which one is the weakest link for us to focus on so that we can break the link more easily?
I think all are very strong. I think all are very strong, but actually, of course, each and every person has a different tendency about this. So I think the most important is that in which part that we really, have understanding. For some people, perhaps because they already practice, like for example, the Vedanupassana, the contemplations of the feeling. I think that is for them it is the weakest part. Of course, not the weakest part, but somehow for them it is the easiest way how to break this dependent Co Origination, because for the whole times practicing about the contemplations on Vedana, contemplation of this feeling. But perhaps for some people, just understanding about the Four Noble Truths, and then she just like to contemplate about the Four Noble Truths all the times, in very often just to contemplate that. This is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, and so on. And perhaps that is also the way. I mean, for such people, such a person, it is the easiest way how to break these links of dependent Co Origination. And perhaps some people just, because he understands well about the tanha, about the craving. And some people I knew that they just, are talking much about the craving, and they understand about the craving, how the craving can create the upadana, the attachment, and they can understand. They never understand about the avijja and so on, but they understand about the craving. Perhaps for such people can really, easy way to have the easy way to break this dependent Co Origination by understanding that craving. So I will not say that which one the weakest way, because all are strong, but the most important is that which one that's really, easy to understand. And each and every person has a different tendency. So therefore, each and every person has a different way how to break this dependent Co Origination. So I think so that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. That was excellent. Breaking of the weakest link is through our own tendencies.
Yes.
Yeah. There's another question. When many people gain enlightenment, or when some people gain enlightenment before their death, does that mean they manage to understand the entire dependent origination at the point of death? And if that is so, how did they manage to do it in the short time?
I still don't understand about, the questions.
That means some people get enlightened at the point of death.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does that mean they understand the whole dependent origination?
Yes, of course. Of course, that because there is one simile that given by Most Honorable Buddha Gosa in Visuddhimagga. So actually, just like the lamp, the lamp is having the how to say the light and the oil, and then the how to say in English, yeah, in Indonesia sumbu. How to say Indonesian people
Wick,
sumbu? What is it? The wick, right? Yeah, the wick.
wick. Yeah.
Yeah, wick. Yes. So the light, the wick, and then the oil, and then there is the oil, the wick, light, and then the fire. There are four, right? On the four. So actually, what is happening now is that according to that Visuddhimagga, the penetrations of the Four Noble Truth, because when the person penetrates this Paticcasamuppada means penetrating these Four Noble Truths. The penetrations of the Four Noble Truths can happen very fast way, very fast. Just like when the person's lighten this lamp, when that lamp is being lightened by the fire, so at that moment there are four things that happen. The darkness disappears, and the wick is also reducing, and the oil is also reducing, and the light appears. There are four happenings in one moment. So likewise, even in the deathbed, such a person at the points of death and then attaining enlightenment, it is a very short time. Even in that very short time, such a person really understand the Four Noble Truths. Because the understanding of the Four Noble Truths can happen within a very short moment, just like the lamp. When the lamp is being, lightened, so the four things happen. The light appears, the darkness disappears, and then the oil reducing, and the wick is also being burned. There are four happenings in one moment. So even in the very short time, such a person could really understand the Four Noble Truths, and of course he can really understand that the factors of that makes such a person's get the suffering, get the rebirth is already cut off, even in that very short moment. So they don't have to have the very very long time to understand that. Just like now, for example, like us, for example, we are already discussing much about the suffering, about the dukkha, right? Actually, when we are thinking about the dukkha, about the suffering, even one moment, actually we have a lot of understanding about the dukkha, about the suffering, even one moment. And I thought, of course, it is quite different from other people who just begin to learn about the suffering. When thinking about the suffering, it is just a very little thing about suffering that he can understand. But for us as the Buddhists, already many years talking much about suffering, about the dukkha. So when it appears in our minds, the term dukkha, the perception on dukkha, on suffering, actually at that time, even in the very short moments, there are a lot of understanding about dukkha. So likewise, such a person to really enlighten, even in the deathbed, in the death moment, in the points of the death, that understanding is a fully understanding of the whole, the Four Noble Truth, and the whole Paticcasamuppada, cutting off the whole factors of Paticcasamuppada. He can understand even in the very short moment. So that is the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. Any more questions from the audience?
Bhante, can I follow up with the answer? Like I have another question to the answer that you just did.
Okay.
But what is it about death that is so special that such that there are many people that can actually gain enlightenment at that time?
Yeah. Actually, there is one discourse that the Buddha says that when the persons in the deathbed understand this and having these kinds of mindfulness, there are two expectations. One is can attain anagami, another one can attain arhanship. So what is this that when the person on the deathbed and then understanding this and giving the mindfulness on this, and then it can be expected the two things, anagamis or arahan, one is by contemplating on marana, by contemplating on this death itself. That means when we are on the deathbed, we are on the very serious ill, and as we understand that it is not long that we will die, and then we just contemplate on the death, contemplate on the that we will die, and then we try our best really to get rid of any kinds of attachment, because those who understand the Buddha's teaching, if really knows that he will die, perhaps he will just try his best how to get rid of the defilements, how to get rid of this attachment. So that means he's really ready to accept everything, really ready to let everything. So by understanding, by contemplating about the death, Marananusati, the Buddha says such a person can attain, if not arahantship, even can attain anagami. That is the way. And also, yeah, when the person contemplating about the asubhanupasi, that means contemplating about this, the asubha, something the not beautiful or something disgusting in everything. That means that is also the way how to get rid of the attachment, how to get rid of this clinging by having asubha, the mental thought of asubha. I think asubha, something that the thing about that everything is actually asubha without any beauty there, like our body, the bodies of others have no any beauty. And in order to get release from this attachment, contemplating this asubha in the dead bed, in the dead moment, that also can lead such a persons to get released from suffering, even can attain arhanship. And another thing is that by contemplating about anicca, sankaresu anicca, not anicca, not anicca with double C and A, but with double C and H-A, anicca, sankaresu anicca. That means not wishing in any kinds of conditioned things. There is no any wishing. That means in that practice of sankaresu anicca, in that deathbed, such a person really not having attachment to any things in the world, really try his best, attempt his best not to attach, not to cling to anything in the world, in the deathbed. That means he makes himself ready to let go everything, to let go all the conditioned things, not facing any kinds of condition, even not wishing to get reborn in the heaven at that moment. So letting go everything. So that if that happens and really the minds are let go everything, such a person, according to the Buddha, can attain not only anagami, even can attain arahantship. So that's why in the Buddha's teaching, actually in the deathbed, we have to really ready. We have to be ready in the deathbed to let go everything, not to attach to anything. By means of what? By anything that we understand about the Dharma. Perhaps we already contemplating a lot about Marana, about the death, and then we are making ourselves to be ready in whatever thing that's happened to us, the death that can happen at any time to us. Or we already contemplate, or we already practicing about how to get rid of all kinds of attachment in all kinds of conditioned things. So if that happens in that deathbed, and we are ready to let go everything, so that also can give us, can lead us to this the destructions of defilements of mind. Yeah, I think that is the answer. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
have
for
a
your
question.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
Okay. What about the karma that one has accumulated through one's lifetime? And then at the deathbed, if we contemplate like what Bhante has said, what happened to all those karma that we have accumulated during the lifetime?
Yes. According to Buddhism, if the persons attain like anagamis or arahantship, many kinds of fruit of karmas, the result of actions that we already, accumulated, the action that we already accumulated in the past that actually should give any result in the future, that becomes ahosi. Ahosi means do not give any result. Just like, for example, is the most venerable Angulimala. He already killed thousands of people. Now some people thought that only 999, but actually thousands of people he already killed. But then he attained arahantship. So the Buddha said to this venerable Angulimala that if you don't attain arahantship, you will get reborn in the unhappy world and experiencing suffering for long time. But because you attain arahantship, so even in the future, there is no any rebirth for you. That means the result of the actions in the past that should give any result, that is ahosi. Ahosi means being destroyed, not giving any result. So that can happen. So that's why in Buddhism, actually, understanding about the karma and rebirth is not to make us to kind of make many actions. Now some people think that now we understand that every, the happiness and the suffering that we experience because of our actions. So therefore we have to do various kinds of actions to get the happiness, to get reborn in the happy world. That is the way of thinking of the most of the people. But actually, the Buddha showing us about this action, this karma, and the result is actually to understand that as long as we have this karma, as long as we have this action, there will be the suffering. So in order to get this suffering, we have not to do any actions. We have to not to do any sanghara. So the practice of meditation is how in that practice we don't do any actions. We don't do any sanghara. Because as long as there is sanghara, as long as there is action, there is karma, there will be the suffering. So there is one saying that we can find in the discourses of the Buddha. Tanha pahana kamang pahiyati. Kamang pahana dukang pahiyati. With the eliminations of tanha, the craving, the action, the karma is also eliminated. With the elimination of this karma, the action, the suffering is also eliminated. So therefore, in this regard, as far as the Buddhist teaching is concerned, understanding of the karma and result is not to make any kinds of the action, but how to get rid of these actions. That's why the practice of the meditation is how not to make any kinds of action. Just be, just be. In the sin, just be in the sin. In the hurt, just be the hurt. Not giving any reaction, not giving any actions, not to make any action. So this is the way how we practice ourselves. So that's why in this regard, when the person really got rid of these defilements of mind, got enlightened, so all the fruits of the action in the past, the actions of the past that already done, will not give any fruit, will not give any result. That is ahosi. So that is the way. So I hope you can understand this. Thank you very much.
So Bhante, only those 5 heinous crimes you cannot get rid of won't be ahosi.
Yeah, actually, mostly only those who really attain arahantship. But there is the indications in some discourses, even for the Sotapanna, the one who attained the stream enterer, is also having, according to the Buddha, just like this. How the comparisons, one small gravel and the huge mountains of Himalaya, the Mounts Himalaya, which one the bigger one? Of course, the Mount Himalaya is very big, and this gravel is uncomparable to this Mount Himalaya. So the Buddha says that Sotapanna, the one who already attained the stream enterer, is just like this gravel. That means his suffering, which is very huge, just like the mountains of Himalaya, already disappears. And his suffering just remaining this small gravel. So these statements of the Buddha indicate that even for the Sotapanna, even for this stream enterer, already makes kind of ahosi to various kinds of suffering that actually can arise in the future. Just only remaining the small gravel, while the huge suffering, just like the Mount Himalaya, already destroyed by this, the one who attained Sotapanna. Let alone this arahantship, all this suffering already gone, all the suffering is already ahosi, destroyed. But as long as we are not attaining, like Sotapanna at least, so we still, have like the possibility to get the suffering, even the possibility to be reborn in the unhappy world. So that's why we, as the Buddhists, understanding this, and then we have to make an effort, our best effort, to get rid of this suffering, to eliminate these defilements of mind as the cause of suffering. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. Any last question? I think I have one last question here.
Okay, please.
Is meditation the most effective way of reducing ignorance?
Of course. Of course, meditation, right? But the thing is that now some people talk like this because, there are some people viewed that for the Sotapanna, for the attainments of Sotapanna, doesn't need the meditations. Because those people see and read in many Buddhist texts, some people just listening to the teachings of the Buddha, just listening just like one verse, one discourse, and then attain Sotapanna. So they believe that to attain Sotapanna doesn't have to develop their mind, doesn't have to develop the mind, doesn't have to meditate. But they don't understand what is the meditation in Buddhism. Meditation is the development of mind, that is a citta bhavana, the development, the cultivations of mind. And this citta bhavana, these cultivations of the mind, these developments of the mind is not necessarily to be like sitting with the closed eyes, not. Even while watching, while seeing, while listening, while, smelling, while tasting, while, touching, while thinking, all those can be the moments of mental development. As long as we train ourselves, for example, when we see the object and then we train ourselves, we have the Sanghara, we have the restraint within our mind, not to let our minds being dragged by the defilements of mind, by the greed and hatred. And that moment is also called as the meditation. While listening to the sound, and then we train ourselves not to let the defilements of mind joining these, the contact between the ears and the sounds. We don't let our minds being swept away by the defilements of mind, by the greed, by the hatred, by listening. That is also meditation. So the meditation is not just, like the sitting, the cross-legged, and then with the eyes closed, not like that. But how far we protect our minds, not to let our minds being overwhelmed by these defilements of mind. So this is what we call as the meditation, what we call as the citta bhavana. So such a person who attained Sotapanna, the straight enter, by listening to the teachings of the Buddha, at that moment, actually, he's also doing meditation. Because at that moment, he also tried to develop his mind, try to cultivate his mind, try to grasp what the Buddha say, and then implement what he understands by listening to the teachings of the Buddha at that very moment in his mind. And that is the cultivation of mind. That is the meditation. And by means of that, Citta Bhavana, the development of the mind, even the very short moment, such a person who already has this very, matured mind could really understand the teachings of the Buddha and could, eliminate certain sangyojana or certain, the defilements of mind that's overwhelmed his mind, and he attained like the stream enterer, the Sotapanna, and so on. So if you ask about whether the best way to eliminate the suffering, to eliminate the defilements of mind is by means of meditation, of course. As far as the Buddha's teaching is concerned, meditation, the Citta Bhavana, the developments of mind is the way how to, eliminate the defilements of mind, how to get enlightened. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bhante, for the excellent, detailed, and clear explanation of Paticcasamuppada.
Thank you very much.
And how to break the links that bind us to samsara. Let us unmute our mics and say 3 sadhus and pay respect.
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.